Hey, this is Leif Ganford. I played the cash register thief in The Amazing Spider-Man, and you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast.
Hey, this is Rich McDonald, and I play Commander David Mason on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. You're listening to Everything Geek podcast.
Hello, I'm Simon Fisherbecker. You probably know me better as Dorian Moldovar from Doctor Who, or the Fat Friar from Harry Potter. And this is Everything Geek Podcast.
Your attention, masters, mistresses. All systems functional for the Everything Geek Podcast.
Hey, it's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Master Plo Koon in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Everything Geek, the podcast.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot with the Everything Geek podcast.
Hello everyone, you're listening to the Everything Geek podcast. I'm your host Ruari, and joining me is co-host Al. And also joining us today is a very special guest. We have actor Erik Jensen, who is best known for playing Dr. Steven Edwards in The Walking Dead, A.D.A Jeffrey Sinclair in CSI Crime Scene Investigation, Derek in Black and White, Thurman Munson in The Bronx is Burning, Isaac Proctor in Elementary, and Professor Jason Byford in Castle, as well as co-creator and writer of the Reconcilers graphic novel. So how are you today, Erik?
I'm very good. Thanks for asking. It's a pleasure to be overseas.
Yeah, better than not being at all. But maybe one day you might actually get overseas in physical form, of course. Yeah.
Well, I hope I get over there one day.
Thank
I'd really
you
like
so
to
much.
meet you guys.
It's always good to have praise. So thank you very much for that, Erik. So getting right into the questions, my first question for you, Erik, is how did you decide you want to become an actor?
Well, you know, it's interesting to me anyway. I grew up really poor in a state called Minnesota, which is in kind of the center of the country. I grew up in a trailer park, actually. So not having the money to have various toys, there were sticks and mud that were always available. So I was usually making swords and other items out of sticks and string and you know, the neighborhood kids and I would have these wars that we'd sort of like, you know, organize, and you know, one side would be the Germans and the other side would be, you know, the British or whatever. We'd go back and forth and fight each other. But then later on, as things got a little better for my family, but also a little worse, my parents started to split up. But one of the things that we found we could do as a family was to do community theater together. So when I was 11, I started doing, like, you know, musicals like The Music Man or Starlight Express. I mean, we didn't do that one, but, like, you know, we would do these amateur stage productions, and the bug bit me at age 11, and I never really looked back. Actually, as an exclusive for you guys, one of the very first movie jobs that I ever had, while I was in college at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, was I got a big audition for a big part on the remake of The Walking Dead that George Romero was producing, and special effects wizard Tom Savini was directing. He's a legend in the special effects world. And I got to the last thing, and another guy beat me out for the part. But Tom and Mr. Romero made it a point to say, listen, come to set, be a zombie. You can be one of lots of zombies coming onto the farmhouse towards the end of the movie, and see how you're going to do movies. So see how this movie thing works. And I got to tell you, as a training ground, it was one of the best experiences of my life. And then George Romero promised me, he said, next time I do a movie, I'm going to cast you in it. And he did. He kept his promise, which doesn't happen very often. I find it refreshing and amazing when producers of that stature honor their commitments and their promises, and it was really great. I mean, it was a really fantastic experience getting to see him work. Then he said he cast me in his next movie, and he did. He cast me in a movie called The Dark Half with Tim Hutton. I'm afraid I wasn't very good, but I did get to watch Tim Hutton work for a day, and I considered everything for the first 10 years of my career to be sort of apprentice type stuff that was a learning experience more than me really being an actor. I think it took me about 10 years to really figure out what I was doing on camera, and I've comfortably settled in. That's why I've been fortunate enough to sort of book things like The Walking Dead. Bryan Cranston, the guy from Breaking Bad, said something once about, your job is just to go in and give them your take on the character, and my take on Dr. Edwards seemed to fit with their vision of him. So it's all, in a way, it feels planned, but actually
that's great. Yeah, and I really like that. You were saying about how you grew up very poor. I think that's great because there are some people out there who think actors, regardless of how big name they are, not just kind of under an illusion that everyone, all actors, they kind of have an illusion, about the whole celebrity thing, and, thinking that actors are always really rich or something and grew up very well. You know what I'm getting at, right? I mean, I think...
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, the next thing I have to do after I do this interview is I have to wash the dishes and fold my clothes because my wife's producing something. And then I got to go pick up my daughter from school and do a play date with her. I mean, most of my time is spent relatively unemployed and spending quality time with my daughter, which is an awesome trade-off, My job, I just consider my job to be the job of going out on job interviews every day of my life. And I have a workman's approach to it. I look on it a lot like being a plumber. I'm going to fit the pieces together this way, and if you like it, great. And if you don't like it, I'm not going to take it personally. And then, every 5 or 6 or 10 projects, you get something really special like The Walking Dead that comes along, and you go, oh yeah, this is why I do this. This is why I let the door be slammed in my face. 8 items. This is what makes it worth it.
Definitely. So my second question for you, Erik, is how did you get the role of Dr. Steven Edwards in The Walking Dead?
Well, that was again, my wife is an actor and also a tremendous director. We also write together. And so basically the industry has changed. It used to be that it'd have to go around town or even get flown out to Los Angeles, or I guess for Walking Dead it would be maybe flown down to a place like Atlanta to audition. But I don't think I've met a director or producer that I'm about to work for in the past probably 3 or 4 years. It's all done on tape now. So I can audition out of my living room, and my wife made me, and she's a strict task mistress. She made me memorize the lines completely, because that means less work for her on the back end. and I did 3 takes of it, and she said, "Yep, that's the one." And I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "I've been married to you for 14 years. You don't trust me yet?" And I said, "Okay, let's send it off." So
nice.
That's the one we sent off. And then, and I think, it was said to me on set a couple of times, what they were looking for with Beth and Dr. Edwards in terms of their chemistry, what they were trying to find was 2 people who had some kind of connection. And it was interesting when I met Emily. She's a musician, and I used to have a band ages ago. I still play guitar and stuff, but I don't play out anymore. And so we talked a lot about guitars and about music and about being in the studio. And then also the weirdest coincidence is, like Dr. Edwards, I'm a huge record hound, and I'm a huge blues hound. Like, I listen to Robert Johnson, Papa Charlie Jackson, Professor Longhair, Magic Sam, Lead Belly, Junior Wells, John Lee Hooker, and Junior Kimbrough. I mean, those guys are like my musical heroes. If I could ever play a single song like one of those guys, I think I could die happy. And so, the stars just seemed to line up. Emily's also from the Midwest, and I'm from the Midwest, and that helps. And so the director was telling me during the course of the show, he's like, you need to remember that she represents how you used to be. She represents what you've lost. And because, Beth is a strong, kind of kick-ass, hopeful character, the way she's presented in Slaptown. When she says, "I still sing," for a second, I think that maybe Edwards thinks that there's still hope in the world, and that maybe his dire predictions about how this is all going to go down has changed, and she starts to change him. Either that, or it's all a setup, and he just wants to make a patsy to kill that other doctor. So the fact that you don't really know what motivates him is kind of, it was being on set was kind of like walking a tightrope, And I think I'm told anyway, I have a reputation for being a relatively effective tightrope walker when playing a character like this. It certainly adds to the creep factor of the character.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree, because, like, with the likes of other characters, the other kind of cops and all, like Dawn and Gorman, well, especially with Gorman, actually, you kind of know what's bad about them. Like, with your character, Stephen Edwards, like, we're led to believe he's a good guy, and then, Beth makes that revelation, and you're like, wow. I mean, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, well, and I also didn't see coming the bit at the end where it looked like she was going to stab me. Like, she was going to shank me. That was about to get Oz on my ass, you know what I mean? And that's the other thing too. Like, there's things that you film, there's things that go on, and you have no idea what the context of them is until you see the final show. That said, I kind of follow the Gene Hackman rule generally. I don't like to watch myself on television or on screen. Much like being on Twitter, it can be very distracting. But this one I made the exception for, and just overall as a piece of art, what the writers and Scott and my director Michael managed to put together, the story they managed to tell is dark and spooky and operates on an entirely different fear level.
That's great. My first question is, what was it like working with the cast and crew of The Walking Dead?
Oh my God! Well, I have so many interests. I studied acting at Carnegie Mellon, but I come from a family of artists. They're all drawers and sculptors and stuff. So instead of growing up learning to play guitar or fix a car or learning football, I grew up learning how to throw pots and sculpt and use watercolors and stuff like that. So I never really had any formal training. It's just something I grew up doing. So, and just to show you what a geek I am, lately I've been sculpting a giant...
I don't, but I think a few of our listeners do, yes.
Oh, right on. Okay, so, I was really inspired by seeing these giant Warhammer gaming boards they have at Games Workshop here in Manhattan. And I decided to make about 2 years ago, I decided to make a giant dungeon crawl to sculpt everything from the bottom up, including the monsters. I haven't gotten good enough to do the tiny little figures that represent the characters, so I'll probably use some Games Workshop characters for those heroic characters. But in terms of everything else, I've sculpted some pretty scary stuff. I'll send you guys some pictures. But so when I got on set, I was excited to be there. I was excited to do the part, but I was equally excited to meet the special effects guys who do such amazing makeup sculpting on set. I wanted to learn their secrets, and they let me into their little lab and showed me a bunch of stuff. And so it was a fanboy geek experience for me that I will never forget. A top moment, probably one of the top 10, getting to go into that special effects trailer. So, but that, across the board, I'm also meeting guys like the cinematographer / director Michael, who directed my episode. He also does the cinematography on a lot of the other episodes. He's an acolyte of Robert Altman, so I got to hear Altman's stories and hear how Altman's approach to it was, and how Michael tried to bring that spirit to set. So I'm a big film and sci-fi nerd and post-apocalyptic genre nerd. So it was like walking into heaven. Those guys who have been a part of that show for so many years have the best jobs in the world. So it was a real pleasure. And everybody's professional. Everybody's at the top of their game. So, like, when you show up, you're like, okay, I'll bring my A game. And then you're like, no, I better bring my A plus game. So there are those scary moments where you're like, oh, crap, can I really pull this off? And everybody's there to support everybody else, and we all work really hard to pull it off together. No one person on that set is more important than any other person. And Andy, actually, Rick Grimes, proved that to me the day that I showed up. He came right up to me and pointed in my face, and he said, I've heard all about you. And I was like, oh, really? And he goes, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I was like, wow. He was looking forward to watching me as much as I look forward to watching him.
So he wasn't talking about, I'm looking forward to burning down the hospital.
Well, no, I think he was looking forward to, the main cast gets advances on all the episodes so they can read them and stuff like that, and Andy's really professional, and I think he's always looking to be a good leader, learn people's names before they show up on set, maybe even familiarize himself with their work, and the producer said, hey, go talk to Erik or Andy. I don't even think they said anything to him. I think he just came over to me. He wanted to welcome me. And at that moment, I realized why he had been cast so many years ago. He's a great leader. And just that brief 10-minute conversation that we had, he was there doing some reshoots for something. That brief 10-minute conversation that we had gave me all the courage I needed to in a way, kind of follow him and follow his example and bring my A game. And I hope
I'd say it does. I mean, I really enjoyed your performance. That's why I contacted you. Yeah. So getting on to my fourth question, what was your reaction to the twist that Dr. Steven had tricked Beth into killing the patient that was also a doctor?
It was the one moment. I think the first takes that I tried to do of it, I tried to do just sort of neutrally and a little bit flip. Like, I even think that I tried to insert a fist bump at the end. Hey, hey kid, go do this and take care of it. And then the director came up and he said, you realize if you bump fists with her, you're going to be the most hated, human being on the planet. Okay. And he's like, that's a little too far, like let's pull it back. And then slowly he kind of helped me insert a little bit of guilt into it, which I think is a much more human reaction, and much more real life. On the one hand, they created a scenario. The first days that we were there, Scott Gimple talked a lot about something called the. I can't remember which university it was right off the top of my head, but it was a university project back in the 70s that the military commissioned here in the United States. And they were trying to figure out why military prisoners and guards were in conflict with each other so often. So they got these students from this university to create a fake prison. And some students were assigned to be guards, and some students were assigned to be prisoners. And they were going to do it for a month or something like that. But after 5 or 6 days, they had to end the experiment abruptly because the pretend guards were actually really abusing the pretend prisoners. And so Scott's kind of and this is how his imagination works when he was talking to us about it. He said, now imagine that those roles that you took on to survive, that's been going on for 2 years. And you've made so many compromises down the line, you have to feel fully justified in how the system works. And, for me, for Edwards, that goes into a breakdown for him. He slowly starts to break down and realizes that he's sold off great pieces of real estate in his humanity. And Beth's there as a reminder of that. It's interesting. I think this season has been really interesting, and I can't wait to see, more of it, because thus far, with Terminus and with Grady Memorial, Scott and his brilliant writers, Matt and Channing, the other guys who wrote that episode, they've done this amazing thing of bringing us into these other survivor worlds, where things haven't gone the way that they went for Rick and crew. No righteous leader has emerged in these worlds. Or if there's a righteousness to the leader, it's like a flawed righteousness. I mean, the way that Terminus started and ended, like, in a way, at the end, you kind of understood why the Terminus guys did what they did, even though it was completely messed up. And I'm really happy to be part of the hospital bit, because it's the same thing. It's just different, So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The only thing I'm questioning after all this is I hope that you at least asked Emily before doing the fist bump. I hope you asked Emily before you did the fist bump.
No, I didn't. I just pulled it. It was so funny. I just pulled it out, because I'm a pretty loosey-goosey dude on set. I think it's because I went to so many Grateful Dead concerts in the '90s, and I'm pretty loose with my choices, and I'm not attached to any single one. She sort of looked down and kind of laughed when I did it, and that may have actually been the moment where we really started to get along, because she thought that was so funny.
I think it's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, no, it's I'm sure somebody's going to put it out there. If me doing that.
If in any of the episodes you raise your fist, I'm just going to be like, right, name.
Poor acting choices 101.
No, I really want to see it.
Yeah. Well, seriously, Eric, no gain out of it. If you even so much as raise your fist a little bit, that meme is going viral.
So, I think that, but I think again, it's like, even good men in difficult circumstances make bad decisions, a series of 3 or 4 bad decisions, all of a sudden you can find yourself, in jail, in your own personal hell or whatever. And, but on the other hand, Edwards has plenty of opportunities to try and change things, and he doesn't. So,
yeah.
He doesn't cop to it, and that's tough, Or if he does, he justifies it, Comparing himself to St. Peter at the end is just like unbelievable. I mean, nothing like that has ever come out of my mouth before, so to have a character be able to say it is just delicious.
It's definitely pretty bold, that's for sure. Pretty bold comparison.
Yeah, right on. Well, I mean, in Edwards, I think there might be a bit of a God complex lurking there, I think there's something lurking there. And it's that God complex plus his anger, plus his rage, which is all kind of boiling underneath, is something that I'd really love to explore. So,
my fifth question is, in the final scene of the episode, we see Beth approaching Steven with scissors in her hand when Carol is brought in. What do you think Beth was going to do to Steven at that moment, and what would she have done afterwards?
That's predictive stuff, and that's hard. I will tell you that in terms of Emily, I've seen her, really come into herself in a phenomenal way in this episode. I mean, she's really there were a couple of looks that she threw back on camera that were just sheer badassery on kind of almost a Norman Reedus level. You know what I mean? and I can see his influence on her, from the time that they spent together earlier, and I would expect that she'd shank me in the side of the head and throw me down the elevator shaft, maybe like he deserves, So I think my reaction would be, making a lot of noise on the way down into that pile of bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree, because if you think about it, when Beth's approaching Steven, your character, I kind of feel like she's not completely in her right mind after hearing, Steven's explanation, basically, for what he did. And, I kind of feel like she's going to kill him without really thinking about what she's doing afterwards. And seeing Carol like that kind of snaps her out of it. I mean, in all seriousness, actually, Beth is one of my favorite characters. So I'm actually kind of glad that this didn't happen. But I really do feel like, the fact that she wasn't really thinking of if she stabs him with the scissors and kills him, everyone else, all the other cops, Dawn and all, are gonna find out, either from hearing his screams or finding his body. I mean, it's pretty safe to say they were gonna have something in place to prevent Beth escaping the same way her and Noah tried to escape earlier. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I already killed the other doctor. So,
yeah.
what are you going to do? But again, it's like the show for me is less about, and this was true in the first Terminus episode, which I watched with my friend Nathan Fillion, who's on Castle. He invited a bunch of us over to his house to watch the season premiere, and the zombies, the walkers, the rotters, whatever we want to call them, aren't really the scariest thing in the show anymore.
Yeah.
It's the people. It's the cannibal. It's the betrayals. It's the hidden agendas, And when Beth has that shank in her hand, I think that side of her starts to come out, and it's a really beautiful and unusual thing when an actress that engaging, without sounding sexist, I mean that pretty and that talented, taps into something you haven't seen her tap into before. It's nice, It's a real treat. There's a Dr. Edwards and a Rick Grimes and in each of us. There's probably not a Norman Reedus in each of us, but
yeah, especially with some of the things Daryl has done on the show, eating snakes. Oh wait, shouldn't have said that. Yeah.
Right.
So
right on. So what else?
My final question to you, Erik, is: do you have any upcoming acting roles or any other projects you would like to talk about?
Yeah, actually, I just did a stint on Person of Interest as a guy who's pretending to be a cop named Walter Dang. I'm about to shoot something here in New York called Odyssey. I'm about to shoot another gig on a show that's shooting in Virginia called Turn. Those just happened. Then my wife and I are writing a pilot. We got hired to write a pilot, which is really cool, for the guy who created Oz and Copper, a guy named Tom Fontana. So in my secondary life, my wife and I are also playwrights, and we've been working really hard to write better and better TV, and just I think the deal came through the night that Walking Dead aired. So I should have played the lottery the same date, darn it. But and then in the spring, there's a rock and roll critic that Phil Hoffman, the late great brilliant Phil Hoffman, played in Almost Famous, named Lester Bangs, who toured around London with the Clash back in the day. And Lester's a gonzo rock critic. He was a guy who got high on meth and wrote 40-page articles all night long about Kiss and Van Morrison and the Clash and Talking Heads and Blondie, and he was part of that whole punk music scene in New York. And then he died of an overdose in his mid to late 30s. And I'd always liked Lester's work. And about 5 years ago, I went to the estate, and my wife and I got the rights to everything he ever wrote. So we wrote a one-man play for her to direct and for me to be in. And that's opening at one of what I consider to be the most prestigious theater out in Los Angeles, a place called CTG, Center Theater Group. And they've been really, really supportive, and it's a hell of a workout. And you know, in a lot of ways, I'm really grateful that I got to do something like The Walking Dead before that play comes out, because, you know, my real heart's in the theater. And when you do something like Walking Dead, you know, people come out for stuff like that. You know, maybe stuff they normally wouldn't have seen had one of us not been in it. So I'm really excited to meet a lot of fans out in Los Angeles when that show opens in the spring. You know, it's fast-paced, drug-fueled, 90 minutes of sheer Lester Bangs brilliance. I can't account for my brilliance. I think that'll be up to the audience and the critics as to whether I even reach that very high bar. But it sure has been a lot of fun putting it together. Lastly, a couple years ago, I wrote a graphic novel called The Reconcilers that got some really good reviews from Ain't It Cool News and stuff like that. So we're still working on some sort of side projects having to do with that. It's a post-apocalyptic, governments control the world, you know, but it's a team book. It's about a team of people who kind of go up against corporate indifference and fight for justice, which is something that appeals to me. You know, I love the post-apocalyptic genre in general. So, as a fan, it was really a pleasure.
That's great. So that's all of my questions to you, X. So thank you very much, and I'll let my co-host Al ask his now.
Thank you. I hope that I wasn't too self-indulgent. I'm from Minnesota, and even talking about ourselves is considered to be.
No, you're great. Yeah.
Your patience.
Yeah.
You're great. You're great. Thanks again for.
Hey Al, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Excellent.
I've just got a few questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to know, like, if you can explain what's your take on Dr. Stevens and Beth's relationship in terms of the art. You know, when they had a scene together in his office and they were talking about the artwork and transcendence. Mm-hmm. What's your personal take on that conversation?
Well, you know, I think this is a world that you know, this is my take on it. I believe that her character is and this is just my imagination working. This isn't rooted in anything that was actually in the script. You have to do a lot of imagining that's kind of outside the lines. You know, it's not always about coloring inside the lines. So in my imagination, it was, you know, Beth was one of the first new people we had here in a long time. And this is a place where, you know, kind of routine and boredom are the order of the day. Routine is the thing that keeps us safe, but it's also the thing that kills your spirit, right? Yeah. So when Beth shows up and you know, is standing there with a IV in her hand as a weapon, I think that's the first fight that Stevens has seen in a long time. And at the same time, I think that he slowly starts to realize that fight in her might work to his advantage. You know, it's hard for me to tell when Stevens is pulling strings and when he isn't. So, but I do think one of the honest moments he has in the piece is the piece about, you know, about how art is for you know, for the civilized parts of ourselves and for the parts that are about transcendence. And when she says, can we do that anymore? Does that exist anymore? He says, I don't know. And I think that's a real moment of connection between them. I think that's a private thought that he's never shared with anybody. And when she answers it in the positive, hey, you know, there's hope, I still sing. I think he starts to feel a little hope in himself. And hope in a person who's locked in or part of a destructive system can be a really good thing and can be a really dangerous thing. You know, you know, even if she provides a way out for him, you know, I think on a certain level, Edwards doesn't want a way out. He wants to stay in the hamster cage. Guinea pig cage. You know what I mean? He really wants to stay in there and not be disrupted like that. So she presents a series of challenges to his humanity right from the outset. I think he tries to take on a mentoring role with her, But again, I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. I mean, personally, if I met him, I'd ask for a second opinion. And if you're curious, I did eat some of the guinea pig for real in that scene.
So they actually gave you guinea pig.
Oh yeah, they had it frozen in Peru, Ecuador, and they flew it in on a plane via FedEx or however you fly guinea pig that's frozen around the world. And the guys, the prop guys, the guys who were handling the food, set it in front of me and said it's edible if you want to try it. And nobody else would try it. And I can't speak for Emily. I don't know if she tried it or not. But I figured, okay, well, Edwards is what he eats. I might as well try it. And it tasted just like gamey chicken, exactly like chicken.
Method acting, right?
Yeah. I was actually disappointed. I wanted it to be, something different. I don't think I'd have it every night. And my wife, being a vegetarian, she was furious about it when I came home. But we got over that.
Cool. My second question is, how does it feel to be the only resident doctor on the show? I mean, is there any prospects of you staying any longer?
I don't know. People will have to tune in to find out. I know that I got on really well with everybody, and if they asked me to, I would. But I can neither confirm nor deny that request has come yet. It's not so much as a prospect of staying as wanting to stay. This is like joining the most amazing circus in the world, the way Scott Gimple, the way the showrunner's mind works, and his level of involvement in just every single aspect of the show, the level of detail that he commits to is almost superhuman. I've never seen a showrunner juggle as much material, information, and talent as that gentleman does. And it's a real, I don't want to sound like I'm stalking him, because I'm not, but it's a real pleasure to be around somebody that creative, because it inspires you to be creative. And it's a real pleasure to be on a set where people show up someday just to watch other actors work, even though they're not on the schedule. That's how I met Norman. He just showed up to watch us work one day. Are you on? No, I'm just gonna hang out and watch, And I mean, after 5 years, when he could be working on his motorcycle or, watching a new Lego movie or whatever, he decides to come hang out with us. That's pretty cool,
Cool. Do you also think that Dr. Stevens has the potential of being like a badass like Rick and Daryl?
Yeah, totally. Are you kidding me? Yeah, but in a more in a more sort of God complex kind of way, I think he's absolutely got that ability. Some people on Twitter have taken to calling me Dr. Shank, because so I don't know if I would be so fortunate as to have a bandolier of scalpels and syringes and anything like that to fight walkers with, but yeah, totally. I think he's got a ways to go. I think he's got to be convinced to get out of that hospital or forced out first. But again, I'm not predictive of. That's all up to the producers and the writers and the fans, frankly. I'm really just happy to be here and really just happy to shoot Slaptown. Best filming experience of my life. But yeah, no, I'm a badass, dude. I played a very famous baseball player called Thurman Munson, and Thurman Munson was famously fat. I gained 30 pounds for the part and could hit home runs way far. Not quite as far as Reggie Jackson, but almost as far. And he was a scrapper. I played a lot of parts like that. So I think that lurks under all of us. There's a beast lurking under Dr. Edwards, and it ain't a guinea pig.
Yeah, he does look quite intimidating sometimes when he's giving Beth that look, when he was explaining to her.
Yeah, I know. Just it would just take one thing to trigger him, one really bad thing. I mean, and there were bits that not everything you film makes it to the cutting room floor. There were bits that we shot that sort of alluded to that a little bit, but at least the bits that stayed in, he does say that he was out there initially killing walkers. I just think I think he's got a lot of post-traumatic stress, and I think he really wants to stay in there. I think he's become very agoraphobic, and it's either the roof or his office. He doesn't want to be anywhere else, except when he goes down to the basement to remind himself why he's staying there.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. That was an interesting scene, that to remind himself what's outside when he thinks about escaping.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like for him. It's almost like going to church. I'm gonna go see what I believe. And he stands there in front of that altar of moving, screaming, moaning rotters, and it furthers his belief in staying.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's how I looked at it. Not to sound sacrilegious, because people go to church for different reasons, but some people go to church to affirm the decisions they've made, and I think that's why he goes down there.
Yeah, even on that point, I mean, my next question is, I always thought that Dr. Stevens was an interesting inclusion to the show. I mean, especially when we just got introduced to Father Gabriel. I mean, how both men compromise their beliefs or ethics in terms of sacrificing others for their own sort of survival. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Seth Gilliam is an old friend. I had the pleasure of working with him on that baseball show I was talking about on The Bronx is Burning. He played one of the other New York Yankees. And so going toe-to-toe to Seth is one of my favorite things to do in the world. So that argument could be very interesting. I think for me anyway, it's separated into sort of the ecclesiastical camp and the scientific camp, the religious camp, and men of science and men of religion view our reason for being here, our soul, and our humanity in slightly different ways, generally. And isn't it interesting to see a man of faith and a man of science compromise themselves in slightly different ways? But I also think that and again, I can't speak for Seth. I'm only guessing because I'm a fan of the show and I love to watch it. I'm guessing that Father Stevens, Father Gabriel, fears in a lot of ways that he's lost his soul, and I think Edwards fears that he's lost his humanity, and that's kind of a theme in the show too. Everybody in the show has lost something. Everyone. And in spite of that, people are resilient and keep going on, and that's what keeps us coming back, isn't it? Yeah. It's their resilience. It's their ability to and hey, look, I want to be Rick Grimes. Other people want to be Rick Grimes. I think more often than not in life, most of us make decisions that are more like Dr. Edwards, or maybe more like Dawn, not in the extremes that I'm talking about. And I think that that's a very very realistic take on humanity. There's nothing scarier than people, man. Well, except for maybe cannibals.
Yeah, Gareth and his Terminates.
Right, exactly. Oh, by the way, I that scared the hell out of me. Like, cannibals are just like, ever since I was a kid, I've had nightmares about cannibals, and when they went in that room that kind of had a meat locker with the bodies hanging on it and stuff, I just about started crying. If it hadn't been for Nathan Fillion, I might have walked away from the television. He helped me.
To be fair, I want him to hold me as well. He has got that look.
Right on.
That's all of our questions for you, Eric, but it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on the podcast.
Right on. Absolute pleasure talking to you guys too. I'll send you little picturey things and links to all my stuff, and I'll dig up these Night of the Living Dead pictures.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we can talk to you again at some point.
Anytime I'm at your beck and call.
Great. So I'll talk to you soon then. Bye.
Check out our website.everythinggeekpodcast.com/EGP. Check out our Facebook page, www.facebook.com/everythinggeekpodcast. Check out our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/users/everythinggeekcast. Check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/everythinggeekp. Check us out on Instagram, Instagram.com/official Everything Geek Podcast. Check out our Mixcloud profile, www.mixcloud.com/Everything Geek Podcast. Email us at the following email, everythinggeekpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our companion podcast, Everything Geek Comic Cast, www.facebook.com/Everything Geek Comic Cast. Make sure to check out the host's YouTube channels. Mine is www.youtube.com/user/Separatist Check out Al's Twitter, twitter.com/mygurma. Check out Erik Jensen on Twitter, twitter.com/Erik Jensen123. Check out this graphic novel that Erik wrote, www.thereconcilers.com/2010. And check out Channel 138 broadcast live from www.channel138.com. Geeks out, everyone.